Baseball season is upon us. FIU baseball taking on Stonehill to begin the 2025 college baseball season. I'm your host, Kevin Barral, here with Jake Gibson, my co-host. Jake, baseball's back. It's been a long time coming. Rich Witten going into year 3 with FIU. A lot of changes to this FIU team, which we're going to dive into position by position. Jake, good always to be with you. I'm very excited for what should be a very fun season, honestly, for FIU.
I'm excited too, man. The expectations have only gotten higher as Rich Witten has been here with FIU, and the hype that they're generating for this season, it's off the charts. The way they're trying to get everybody into that baseball stadium for opening day against Stonehill, Friday, February the 14th at 6:30. The hype is palpable, and it's to be believed because the expectations we have here for FIU is it's very exciting to say the least.
So in year 2 for Coach Witten, obviously big step in the right direction, finishing 27-30 with an 11-13 conference record. They finished with a win in the Conference USA tournament against the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. That was by final score of 7-5. Unfortunately, FIU loses in the winner's bracket against Dallas Baptist, and then unfortunately loses again in the loser's bracket to Western Kentucky 8-5. FIU, a lot of changes to the roster, Jake, but just looking back at this last season, I mean, a lot to be, happy about, I guess is the best way to put it. FIU gets off to an awesome start. You beat an LIU team that struggled a lot last season. You go, unfortunately, lose to Bethune, but then you play Notre Dame very well at home, splitting the series. Doesn't go very well against Seton Hall. You end up splitting that one. You beat Bethune at home. You go to you have the home and home series against FAU, lose both on the road, but winning the home game, losing to FGCU, and then you start conference play, taking 2 out of 3 against Middle Tennessee. Then the midweek start again there with Miami, losing to them in a walk-off fashion. Western Kentucky, you take 2 out of 3 against Miami. You lose that one. Against La Tech, you take 2 out of 3, which was the best team in the tournament after all was said and done. Jack State, you lose that one 2 out of 3. You take the doubleheader against FGCU. Now a weekend series against Wofford, you take 1 out of 3. You beat FAU 1-0, and then you finish it with a sweep against New Mexico State. You lose all 3 to Dallas Baptist, the only sweep of the season for FIU.
I think they also got swept by Sam Houston, if I'm not mistaken.
You're right. Yeah, they did get swept. It's only 2 sweeps. Unfortunately, I think, Jake, for FIU, it kind of came down a little bit. Like, it was not a downward spiral to be, exactly, but it was definitely a slow trajectory where they were starting going downward. I mean, you lose 2 out of 3 to Liberty. You lose all games to Sam Houston, and at that point, you're already down a couple of guys. Orlando Hernandez was no longer available for the team. Ryan Kabarkis was no longer available due to injury. And you were losing your 2 best relievers, guys who came in and big moments during the game. And unfortunately, it definitely came back to bite them in the conference tournament.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there were definitely some quality wins as the schedule progressed. You had 2, like you mentioned, 2 solid wins against Notre Dame. While things didn't go your way completely in that FAU series, you can walk out of there knowing that you protected the 305 with that 7-4 win. But definitely the piece de resistance, beating Miami for the first time in years. The Canes have had our number, but FIU put an end to that, and that's very commendable to do, especially in Coral Gables as well, as where they got that win. And then you mentioned the end of the series against Iowa. Very solid first game in that series. But yeah, against the teams that mattered the most in the latter end of the season against DBU, we knew DBU was going to be one of the better teams in Conference USA. So to see how FIU would do against them would really sort of give us an idea of where this baseball team was. And unfortunately, like you said, they got swept by them. So it was definitely not a good look for the team. And it didn't provide any belief that they could potentially do anything in the CUSA tournament. But they did shock a lot of people with that win over Western Kentucky to begin it. And unfortunately, lose to Dallas Baptist once again. And then lose to Western, who obviously wanted revenge when they got to play FIU again there. So definitely the question now for this FIU team has to become, can they beat the top dogs in Conference USA? And it's likely that it's going to be Dallas Baptist. They just have an amazing baseball program over there at DBU. Can FIU stack up to those guys? That's going to be a big question that needs to be answered for this FIU team.
And you're adding a team in Kennesaw State as well this time around.
True.
And you will actually face a future opponent, which we'll talk in a bit about Ware State. But just quickly looking at some of the numbers from last season, amongst the conference, which was 9 teams, FIU finished 4th in batting average. They finished 2nd in on-base percentage, and they went on to finish 3rd in slugging percentage. And then on the pitching side, definitely a lot of not too shabby, I guess, for FIU, finishing 4th in ERA. FIU, I think, finished as well 5th in what is it called? Innings pitched. And then on the defense, FIU really struggled defensively with the most errors in Conference USA, 92 errors, 28 of those by Alex Uloa, which we'll talk about in a bit, a huge returner for FIU. But at the end of the day, there was a lot I think on the offensive side of things for the Panthers. You look at what they did in terms of just carrying the load for the pitching staff, and you look back at, the New Mexico State series, for example, FIU put up 10 runs right at the start, 10 in the lead. New Mexico State came back 10-10, and FIU had this, kind of play big time there and really get it going against a really good New Mexico State team at the time. A team that they should have swept, and they ended up sweeping, but they should have won that game handedly. When you're leading 10-0, that just doesn't happen.
Yeah, for sure. There were definitely some flashes of greatness when everything was clicking for this baseball squad. You saw that I know it's easy to say their win against Long Island, but that definitely was a very solid performance for them to open up the season. When this team was clicking, they took down conference opponents such as Western Kentucky pretty handedly. And when everything was working for them, they stacked up to power conferences. I mean, with Notre Dame and in Iowa and whatnot. So it is definitely shocking when you really see on a list the amount of outgoing players this team had. But I'm very happy to see the amount of talent that they were able to bring in just one offseason, standing, I believe, at 26 just incoming players. I mean, it's very impressive. You're definitely going to lose some icons of the team. Ryan Guida, Kev, that's going to be a big loss for this team. The slugger that Guida was during his time with FIU, it's hard to match what he was able to bring to this offense. And Rich Whitten, it's going to be a tough challenge for him to figure out who's going to be that new guy for FIU, that new slugger who you can rely on game in and game out. But yeah, they have brought in a lot of talent. I'm really interested to see where they lean as far as who's getting the nod on opening day starting for the infield, the outfield, like how that's going to turn out for the first series and how they want to move things around for each series when you get to the Saturdays and the Sundays.
Yeah, and we were talking to Whitten not too long ago on this show actually, and he was saying, like, for the last 2 years he has not had to worry about the DH position. Ryan Guida made every single, I guess, start at DH for FIU.
Mm-hmm.
So now that's definitely going to be one of the biggest things I'm looking at least. Who will be that DH? There's a lot of candidates, which we'll get into in a bit. But really quickly, let's go to Rich Whitten. Let's talk about, we spoke to him not too long ago, but, I had the chance to speak to him, this week prior to the game. And he had a lot to say about not just Stonehill, but just looking ahead and looking at just how this offseason went along, the pitching staff, and what things are going to be looking like now as we go into February 14th.
Yeah.
Alrighty, let's talk about the outgoing players for FIU, Jake. You mentioned Guida, but there's a lot of them. I mean, you have Ronnie Medina, Roylan Quevedo, Nick Patelli, Ryan Cabarcas, Chase Engelhardt, Andre Martinez, Jaquan Smith, Richie Pena, Orlando Hernandez, Armando Becerra, Joel Pinheiro, Jackson Ritchie, Adrian Figueroa, Jeff LaCory, Matthew Corpus, Ryan Guida, Jacob McKenzie, Zach Lampton, Cameron Knox, Jamel Vera, and Lucas Chantres.
You just kept going and going there, Kev. Wow. Yeah, you just kept going there. It's crazy. The amount of
maybe me. Hold up. Yeah, it is me. Hold up. Give me a second.
Okay.
All right, Jake, let's talk about the outgoing players. A lot of them for FIU. There's 21 outgoing players, 26 incoming. So it's Ronnie Medina, Roylan Quevedo, Nick Patelli, Ryan Cabarcas, Chase Engelhardt, Andre Martinez, Jaquan Smith, Richie Pena, Orlando Hernandez, Armando Becerra, Joel Pinheiro, Jackson Ritchie, Adrian Figueroa, Jeff LaCory, Matthew Corpus, Ryan Guida, Jacob McKenzie, Zach Lampton, Cameron Knox, Jamel Vera, and Lucas Chantres. A lot of names outgoing for FIU. We'll talk about the incomers later, but Jake, we already mentioned Guida a little bit, but when you look at this, you also have Ryan Cabarcas and Orlando Hernandez, two staples in that bullpen. Zach Lampton, who made who closed out a lot of games for FIU. Joel Pinheiro, I believe, is the only player that really entered the transfer portal. The rest of them were seniors. Mm-hmm. So Pinheiro going to Cincinnati, I believe, in the Big 12, I want to say, is where they're currently stationed in baseball, or Big 10. But yeah, man, look, that's a big loss, Pinheiro. I mean, ideally, he would have been your opening day starter going into February 14th against Stonehill. But you still look at this team at the moment, and a lot of outgoing guys that you knew were going to leave. So this staff, this regime prepared for that, and we'll talk about the incomers in a bit. But you still have a lot of returning pieces. You still have guys like Austin Deering, Brian, Keyshawn Frett, Alex Uloa, and even on the pitching staff, you still have Owen Puck. You still have those, guys. So overall, big losses, especially guys like LaCory, Guida, Pinheiro, and the bullpen. But, you still have a lot of returners where you could balance out the losses, and you'll still have a pretty good offense. And, we'll talk about the pitching situation in a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like FIU is just losing depth in one position. They're losing depth across the board, and it's definitely concerning. But at the end of the day, they did keep a lot of talent. It really feels like they kept a lot of their talent that you would definitely see starting opening day. Like I'm like the first game starters. They did a good job retaining those. It's the guys that you kind of rely on towards the latter end of the series that they lost a lot of talent in. And a lot of those names hurt. Jeff LaCory, one of those reliable hitters that he literally came in, broke a lot of numbers, and then he's out. I mean, respect to him for doing that. But Joel Pinheiro, Cam Knox, just we already had a belief that one of the biggest problems that FIU may have had last season was pitching and the reliability of their bullpen. Even that took a hit as far as outgoing players go. So it's nice. It's nice to see for a change that there's more incoming players than outgoing. So Rich Whitten and this coaching staff is going to have a lot of new pieces to work with, even a surplus amount of pieces they're going to work with to craft that perfect batting order and to craft the perfect starters per game. But it's definitely disappointing to see the amount of players that have left via the transfer portal. I know Rich Whitten talked about the difficulty of not just finding but retaining players in this day and age with college baseball and the transfer portal, not to mention being located here in the 305 and how that can both help and deter players from coming here. But all things considered, it's definitely it's going to look very different. This starting lineup is the best way to put it. It's going to look very different. You're going to have some returning players, but for the most part, I wouldn't be shocked if you're going to see quite a few new guys almost immediately in this game against Stonehill.
Yeah, no, we definitely will. We'll see a new opening day starter for FIU for sure against Stonehill. But let's do a little position by position dive here on what FIU could look like. Beginning at first base, I think we don't even have to pencil it, and you could write it in pen. Brylan West will be FIU's first baseman come opening day. And honestly, I don't know if he'll be the leadoff guy or not, but let's quickly go to what Coach Whitten had to say about that, because it was actually not even his idea. It was his JUCO coach's idea to make him a leadoff hitter, something that is not very usual. And we'll go to Rich in a bit here, but Jake, talk a little bit about that, because this is a guy who you look at him and he's 6'4", 233 pounds. That is not a leadoff hitter. That's like a cleanup hitter. That's your cleanup guy. That's like your fifth guy in the lineup. That's not your leadoff guy. But Brylan has this thing where he's such a good contact hitter. And he could also take it, he could go take it over the fence. He could, so he has some serious power as well. So definitely a guy to keep there at that leadoff spot. I think he led off almost every game. Maybe there was like the second guy, but I think he led off every single game for FIU.
51 games total is what Brylan was able to do. And let's not kid ourselves. Yeah, he has a build that you wouldn't expect for him to have that much power in, but wow, to see how he came in from the JUCO level, because we know this, regardless of sport, JUCO has talent. You just have to get lucky to find the right player for the job. But if you can, the JUCO can be very beneficial to a D1 program. He came in and immediately changed what players at his position can do here for FIU. The amount of stats that he ended up leading from this team, and this is a team with Guida with a whole bunch of power. OPS, the best. Triples, the best. Triples, he was the best in for FIU. Walks was the best. You didn't even always have to rely on power. He was a great fighter when it came to these at-bats against really good pitchers that Conference USA has. Like you'd mentioned, 11 home runs. My gosh. He was ultimately named to the CUSA second team all conference. He could have, I think he did good enough to even get some first team considerations for what he was able to do.
I think he'll be a preseason. There's a good shot that he'll either be preseason player of the year I think he'll be preseason first team. But
yeah,
I mean, look, he and I'm trying to find the stat, but he was one of, let's see, he was one of 1, 2, 3, 4 guys who hit double-digit home runs. So,
by the way,
as impressive as it gets.
He's got the clutch gene. You remember that 2-run homer against Western Kentucky in the CUSA tournament game that the FIU ended up winning? He belted a 2-run dinger. He's got the clutch gene. That's all I'm going to say. That is so hard to find with some players. He's got it.
I'll never forget the Keyshawn homer in that game either. But
it was
I mean, Brylan West, definitely a guy who I'm very excited to see what he can do. Definitely. It's hard for me to say he's the best player because there's so many good players on this team.
It's
but
tough.
Let's talk about let's listen into what FIU head coach Rich Wynn had to say about Brylan and him coming back for 2025. Alrighty, staying at first base. We'll talk a little bit very quickly about Enrique Alvarez Jr. I'll just quickly mention him. I think he'll get his opportunity during the midweek games. Also could play the outfield. I mean, look, Brylan was not just limited to first base. He was also at third base as well this past season. He actually started the season last year at third base. Remember that. So if Enrique Alvarez has a big season, or not even season, just a big spring, that definitely could be a leading factor into putting him at first base. But moving on, the catching situation is one that's not really going to change. And honestly, it's a really good situation to have there, Jake. You have Brendan Rooney, who I'm expecting to be the starting guy on opening day. He's most familiar with the rotation. He's definitely the best defensive catcher, I would say, amongst the guys here. But look, there's a lot of newcomers to this position. You have a Rene Lastres who's coming in from Charlotte, Mark Hirsch, the freshman, who has made a very, very good first impression. And then you have Nelson Rivera, who was injured all of last season, but he is a USF transfer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, without a doubt. I think I do agree with the idea that Roney's going to be your day one starter, but he definitely has some tough competition coming in. But I think he's earned the right overall to be a starter in this system for FIU. He's been able to showcase both longevity as well as reliability at bat in his 2 seasons here with the Panthers. Last season, 41 games, 32 starts. I mean, 4 homers doesn't really scream effectiveness at bat, but 16 RBIs is very solid. He even had a solo homer in the game that Miami won, or in the game that FIU won over Miami 9-7. He contributed to that with the solo moonshot. So I think he's definitely has the evidence to prove why he deserves to be the starter day one. I do agree with that.
Brennan Rooney has a tendency to hit home runs against Miami. I think all of his home runs come against Miami, which is pretty funny. Right. Yeah, I don't think I'm totally wrong with that stat, but quickly, just looking at someone like Lastres, for example, who what started his career at UF, was there for a couple seasons, then goes to Charlotte, doesn't find a lot of success there. I think this is a guy who has the power potential to be this team's DH. It'll be either be him or Keyshawn. I'm sure that'll be a rotating spot in the lineup. But with Lastres, he has a good arm behind the plate. He's shown a lot of strides. I think he has the one knee down tactic which is becoming more and more popular. It gives you a little bit of a step behind when trying to throw out guys. But with the guys, with the coaching staff there, I'm sure that he'll be someone who's definitely going to improve over time. And Mark Hirsch, I'm expecting to see a little bit of Mark Hirsch as well. And Nelson Rivera has been a really good addition too. Yeah. So, all right, let's move on to the infield, Jake. I think this is where the biggest battle is going to come here because Ulloa was the team shortstop last season. Started every game there, but he had 28 errors. I think that's the biggest reason why he was snubbed from the all-conference team. But
Yeah.
the offensive profile is there, man. 11 home runs. He hits for contact. He's an on-base machine. He doesn't strike out too much. I would have to check how many times he struck out, but definitely wasn't as much as I thought, at least. And I'll check really quickly here the numbers. He only struck out 46 times in 214 ABs. So that's not shabby at all by any means. But
Yeah.
Jake, talk a little bit about Alex Ulloa. I think there's a good chance that he will be the team's starting second baseman.
Yeah.
Because of other names that are coming in, which we'll talk about the incomers.
I mentioned longevity with the catcher position, but I don't think there was anyone with better longevity technically within Ulloa. Started in all 57 games last season. That's one hell of an achievement.
21.4 strikeout percentage.
For a position that's as challenging as shortstop, to be able to come in and provide service all games of the season, including the CUSA tournament, there's something to definitely be said about that. Now, yeah, you definitely mentioned the errors. If he's able to mitigate that and work on that in this offseason and come out staying consistent as far as what he can do at bat, but just being an even greater a better fielder in a roster that's full of great fielders that this team has. If he can do that, I'm not saying maybe a position change is needed. I think, but he definitely needs to work on that solely. I think he's got the batting wise, he's got that down. He's reliable when he needs to be. And he's not afraid of going yard either. I think he finished second in the team with home runs. 11 total. Yeah. So he definitely has that down. That's nothing to be worried about. But yeah, you mentioned it, errors. He definitely needs to mitigate those. And if he does, I think he definitely makes the case rather second team or even first team.
Yeah, and I think he'll definitely make an all-conference team. It's just a matter of which one he will make. And, just staying on that topic, I mean, he's been challenged, man. There's no other way to say it throughout the fall, at least from what we've been able to watch. Ulloa swapped a lot between short and second. I'm definitely interested to see, where they're going to put him. Another name I want to mention really quickly, who's I think going to be given the biggest challenge, two guys, Kara Valentine and Adonis Velez. Now, Velez is a freshman. Originally, I believe, was committed to FSU, flipped to FIU, thanks to really good convincing, I would say. And Valentine was, I believe, the JUCO Defensive Player of the Year. So a lot to take in mind there. Now, Valentine, I think, will be the starting shortstop just early on is my prediction. Valentine, again, the Defensive Player of the Year at the JUCO level. Pretty good bat-to-ball skills. I like what I've seen, and I think this is definitely a good player. 400 batting average in 49 games. He went to FCS AA All-State team. He had 76. He finished with 76 hits and second in doubles and drove in 38 runs, 7 home runs. This is a really good player. Who was at the College of Central Florida. I believe that was Bryland's old college. I would have to check. But definitely a guy who I'm really excited about.
Yeah, without a doubt. As far as Adonis goes, I mean, we know this about college baseball. There are so few positions available that freshmen getting a shot at a starting position is damn near impossible. I hate to admit it because from the tape that we have been able to see from Adonis specifically, it does look very good. I think he would need to perform miracles during practices for Richwood and the coaching staff to give him at least even a bit of thought about starting immediately. Can we see a guy like him perform towards the latter ends of a series, like the Sunday series, for example, the Sunday matinee? Yeah, I can definitely see that happening. But yeah, the infield, my gosh, the amount of talent in the infield specifically, Kevin, it's very impressive. And it's going to be rough for the coaching staff to figure out where to put everybody and to build not just one starting lineup, but like 3 or 4 as the series progresses, because no matter where you look, there's going to be guys that are more than good enough to get that spot.
Yeah, and that's one thing when noted. You want to have a tough time building out this lineup. He was even mentioning, every night he goes to sleep thinking about what this team could look like with 9 players on the field. Yeah, I mean, it's just like, what could this team look like, on opening day against Stonehill? And I'm wondering the same thing. Not every night like he is, but every once in a while, I'll definitely look. I go to a scrimmage or I go to a practice and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of talent on this team, but. Just looking ahead really quickly, I believe Sammy Fisher will be the team's third baseman. Had a lot of, played a lot actually for a freshman. Played in a total of, let me look it up. 32 games, started 17,
Mm-hmm.
all I believe at third base, or he kind of rotated around the infield, but definitely a guy who didn't have too much success, only hit 197 with a 329 on base percentage, which isn't too shabby, honestly. But I think this guy with just more playing time will definitely get it going. But I believe he will be the team's starting third baseman. Another name to quickly mention on the infield, Jake, is Kyle Kohler, an incomer. Comes from, I'm not even going to mention the JUCO name, but it's a very complicated JUCO name. Yeah, you just saw it, huh? But look, this is a guy who could definitely be the starting DH. He could also play a little bit of first, play right. I mean, look, this is a power-centric guy. Definitely put up some good numbers, and I've heard really good things about Kyle Kohler. Again, another big piece to this Panthers infield.
How crazy is it, Kevin, that we finally have to start having these DH conversations after all these years? It's weird. It's strange that we even have to talk about this, but that is such is life. Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely interested to see how they're going to put Kohler in there, but yeah, I'm definitely interested to see how much time Fisher will get. He was your guy when it came to the midweeks, right? He was your guy when we got to the CUSA stretch of the season. That's really, I think that's where he really blossomed during the time here, during this time here last season. But if the rumors are true that West is going to be the guy at first base and just first base, then I think that's going to open the door for Sammy to get a hell of a lot more playing time this season and improve his game even more.
All right, looking at the outfield, this is definitely a very interesting situation. You don't have Jeff Corey anymore, and you don't have Armando Becerra. So those are two starters out the door for FIU. So just quickly reading it off, Cole Cleveland, Hector Candelas, Austin Deering, Keyshawn Frett, Albert Serrano, Ryan Hunter, Logan Shapiro, Sebastian Barrios are your outfielders for this season. Now, Austin Deering and Keyshawn, some way, somehow are going to get there. I think it'll be Deering in right, and I think it'll be Keyshawn in left. Now, Deering could also see some time at center field, but I think the big name to mention here is Cole Cleveland, freshman out of Delray Beach. He was committed to FIU very, very early on. So just keep that in mind. He went into some sort of prospect camp, and that's when the big names started calling in Kentucky, Vanderbilt, FSU. He stayed committed to FIU through and through, so definitely something to keep an eye out on. But he did go through some injuries during the spring. So I think the name to really that's a name to look out for. Definitely, I think he will see some playing time. But another name to look out for is Albert Serrano, who, according to Rich Witten, did lead the team during the fall season in hits. This is a guy who's very quick. He could lead off or even get into the 9-hole. I think this is a guy who's going to play center field. If it's not going to be in right, I think it'll be in definitely center and the guy who's going to see, some extended time for sure. And you also have a Hector Candelas who could play all three outfield spots. He'll definitely get in some playing time. He's one, not a leader per se of the team, but he definitely is up there as one of the leaders of this team. But he definitely put it, he made his mark during conference play. And I think that's the guy who's also going to get some time.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, AD, Austin Deering, and Keyshawn Frett, you can take that to the bank, that they're going to be your guys in the outfield. As far as what position Rich Witten wants them to be between left, center, and right, that's definitely up for debate. But, I mean, Keyshawn Frett, if he had a monster year last year, I can't wait to see how he improves his game. I mean, my gosh, 16 homers, leading the team in that, 7th in Conference USA. It's a bit disappointing in hindsight that 16 home runs only got you 7th place in Conference USA, but it goes to show you how great this conference is in baseball terms. It's really good. But yeah, Keyshawn Frett, there's nothing that would tell me that he's not going to be ready to go and ready to hit some moon shots. Second in OPS, by the way. That's really good. I mean, for a player like him. And then AD, he also was a very reliable player last year. There was, I believe, Kevin, I believe it was toward the middle of the season where he went on that legendary heater. He was like on base every single game, hit dingers every single game. If he can take what he did during that heater and then stretch it towards an entire season's length, I mean, my gosh, he's also going to be a force to be reckoned with. And then you mentioned it kind of opens up from there. Hector Candelas, I do understand this is going to be a senior year. He has spent a lot of time here or in his junior year. Definitely going to want to see a bit more out of him because, again, you combine a returner like Candelas with a pretty stacked list of newcomers that can all get time here immediately, and it's going to be tough to figure out that third spot. But I do feel confident, Kevin, AD and Keyshawn will be the 1 and 2. It's just a matter of finding the 3. That's going to be very tough for Coach Witten.
Yeah, definitely. And look, just quickly throwing a projection out there, I think it'll be left field. I think it'll be Keyshawn. Center, I think it'll be Albert Serrano, and then right, I think it'll be Austin Deering. Just
Serrano.
how I see it again. Now, again, look, spring camp could change everything, but just from what I've been seeing so far, I think that'll be the case. Now, the big topic, Jake, and I think we need to talk about it, the pitching.
Mm-hmm.
Pitching was an issue for FIU last year, no doubt about it. Again, FIU gave up, I want to say, they gave up the 4th most amount of hits in Conference USA. They gave up the 4th most amount of runs in Conference USA. They walked the most batters in Conference USA. And they had the 4th most amount of strikeouts in the conference. Again, look, some good stats for sure. You're only, I believe, 5th in ERA. You're 4th in strikeouts. But you don't want to give up that many walks. And that's a big issue FIU had. But looking at the lefty pitchers first, because I think that'll be a big piece of this team, we have Jaden Bishop, Tristan Dietrich, David Eckes, Ryan Ryerson, Juan Villarreal, who is also known as Choco. Those are your lefties. Now, when I look at this, I think the starter potential comes from someone like a David Eckes, who was your midweek starter almost all season last year, went to the Cape Cod League, found some success. Yeah. Then you also have someone like a Juan Villarreal, who really impressed me just from what I saw during some scrimmages. I think he struck out like 7 in like 3 innings of work. It was extremely impressive. Very good swing and miss stuff. They're saying he could get it to the mid-90s, which is very, very – I'm just excited to see that now in the fall. And then you have someone like a Tristan Dietrich, who unfortunately really ran into some command issues. Jaden Bishop definitely came in for FIU, was a very good – not very good, but he was a very serviceable guy. Now, went into the summer, had a very good summer at the Valley League, and he's coming back, and I think he'll be a very nice piece to the Panthers bullpen. Then you have a Ryan Ryerson, who I believe was injured all of last season, so I'm excited to see what he does. And again, you don't have too many lefties in this pitching staff, but I think you have some quality arms that are definitely going to help. And someone like a Tristan Dietrich could come in and he could start games right away now for FIU. I think, with the season now under his belt, it'll take him some more time. It was going to take him a little more time than, for example, Evan Alwan, who we'll talk about later. But I think Dietrich is definitely going to be a piece in this rotation at some point. Yeah. And I think you'll see himself at least making a lot of midweek starts.
Yeah, Dietrich was a guy that we have thought literally years in advance that when he got to FIU, he was going to make a big name for himself. But I'll keep it above you, Kevin. The pitching position here is probably the one I'm most like, don't really have a lot to say about him right now. It's the most like, I'll believe it when I see it kind of position for FIU, because when it comes to batting, I can definitely look at all the numbers and be like, okay, these are going to be the guys, and fielding and be like, okay, these are going to be the guys that you can rely on. When it comes to pitching, I mean, I really don't know where to really go with this. As far as I think maybe this is a controversial take, Kevin. I like the righties more than I do the lefties for FIU pitching.
That's a fair take, yeah.
Righties guy, I feel like I have a bit more talent at this exact moment, because again, there's a lot that needs to be decided, but I mean, the 1-2 of Owen Puck and Logan Rundy could be really good. You mentioned Alwan, but maybe I'm a little bit biased because Kevin, we had Owen Puck on not that long ago, but I definitely did like what I was able to see from Owen in kind of a short time span. But I think definitely pitching is going to be the I'm going to believe it when I see progress kind of scenario for this squad, because unlike batting, which this team has proven year in and year out that they can be reliable when it comes to scoring runs, pitching wise, I really don't know who could be the ultimate star, whether it's going to be one of those returners like Puck or Rundy or one of the newcomers, which I'm just hopeful that FIU did as good a job with getting these newcomers for pitchers as Rich Witten has said that they have. So I'll believe it when I see it.
Yep, definitely. All right, so I think we've kind of covered everything, Jake, at least on the player side. So let's take a look at the schedule, Jake. And it's not as strong as it was last season.
Not as flashy, right?
There's some teams that aren't as well known, but they're pretty solid. So starts off 4 games set against Stonehill. You have a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday game. Then your first road game, just like last season, is against Bethune-Cookman. You welcome Delaware for a 3-game set. Then you travel to USF, which I think is going to be a very notable game, Jake. This is a team that FIU has not played since 2022 when FIU lost against them. I want to say. I'm going to look.
I kind of wish this was a series instead of a one-time kind of game. I'd love.
I agree. It was a 14-9 loss. So this was in Coach Witten's first year at FIU.
Yeah.
FIU had this season series. They still do, actually, but they're on a 2-game losing streak. They have not beat them. Actually, this was a home and home. So it was home and home in 2022. Lost both games to USF. I'm sorry. I'm very excited. Hopefully, we could get out there and watch that one. But then you welcome Merrimack for a 4-game set, a doubleheader on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
First game against Miami. Location to be announced is what the schedule says. Florida Atlantic, you're doing a home, away, and then a home game. You're going to the FGCU. You welcome Bucknell for 4, and then you begin conference play at home against Jacksonville State. Midweek against Bethune. You have 3 games against Middle Tennessee on the road, at Miami and Coral Gables. Then you have 3 at Louisiana Tech. So a very long road trip, I guess, if you want to say it. It's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 game road trip for FIU, quote unquote. I mean, you're basically at home for the Miami. And
it's a short bus ride, you know?
Yep. Then you're going up against New Mexico State for 3 games at home. And then another long road trip, a 4-game road trip, FGCU, and then 3 against Kennesaw State. You go up against Miami at home, then 3 against Western Kentucky at home. Then you have FAU on the road, Dallas Baptist on the road. So it's a 5-game road trip because you finished the road trip against Miami at Coral Gables, 3 against Liberty at home, and then you finished the season like last season against Sam Houston on the road. Yeah. So feels like a lot more road games, at least for conference play for FIU.
Yeah.
But again, look, this is a very favorable schedule. FIU should really be able to take advantage of the non-conference portion of this. And again, Sam Houston lost some talent. Dallas Baptist lost some talent. La Tech lost some talent, obviously, just because of how the MLB draft works. But, Jake, look, again, favorable schedule. I really am curious where FIU finishes in the preseason poll. I would have to say they're towards the top because they made the tournament. They won a game in the tournament. They bring back a lot of returning talent for the most part, and you bring in some good incoming talent. FIU should finish towards the top of this preseason poll.
I agree. I will say this schedule, all things considered, definitely nowhere near as flashy as last year's. Right? Last year you had matchups against Notre Dame, Iowa. I mean, in sports like football, Notre Dame and Iowa, 2 very prominent football programs. Baseball wise, they're also they're like household college names. You don't really get a whole lot of that this season. I mean, Stonehill. I mean, Kevin, do you know where Stonehill is? Stonehill University,
New York.
You weren't far off. Easton, Massachusetts. All right, not too shabby. But yeah, these teams definitely don't scream like top dog talent. But I think that's the beauty of college baseball, because teams can look super different year after year, and a small college that you've never heard of can be fighting for a spot in Omaha in the College World Series. So, without a doubt, I do think, like you said, this is a very favorable matchup. I'm assuming that the reason there's quite a bit of road games towards the conference stretches. I mean, gosh, how many home games are there in the non-con? Stonehill home is a home series. Delaware. I'm excited for the Delaware matchup. This is going to be a preview of a matchup that we're going to continue to see as the years go on when Delaware joins Conference USA in the next academic year. South Florida, we already talked about it. I'm very pumped up for that game. I wish it wasn't a midweek and instead like a 4-game series, because I feel like that would be super awesome. And once again, you have the duo of Merrimack and Bucknell. Definitely 2 programs that I'm not 100% sure if FIU has even played these teams in baseball prior. Let me quickly check that just to verify. Starting off with Merrimack, they've never played Merrimack before, and then moving on to Bucknell. Just to quickly see here. They've never played Bucknell before. So then you get towards the conference schedule. There's really only one thing I can say about the CUSA schedule. Don't get swept, right? I mean, I get it. You have to go to Dallas Baptist, but please don't get swept. We need to see improvement, and improvement for this. I'm not even saying win the series against DBU. Over at DBU, win the series. That's a tough ask. I'm not even going to do that. Win one. Either win the opening, the Friday game, or one of the latter 2 in the Saturday and Sunday. That's fine. but you got to have progress against the best that Conference USA has to offer, and it's Dallas Baptist. DBU has a target on their backs. They know that, and they have the talent to deal with it. For FIU, you need to beat DBU just to get a little bit of confidence that if you get into the CUSA tournament, you're probably going to have to play DBU again at some point. You need to know how to beat this team. So if you can do that in Dallas, that would be very impressive. Same thing with Sam Houston, though maybe not to the full extent. I just don't like losing to Sam Houston. Regardless of the sport, I mean, their fan base. That's all I'm going to say. But yeah, beat Sam Houston to close out the season on a high note. That's what I'm trying to say. If you can close out your final series against Liberty on a high note at home, then you got to go on the road. If you can take 1 or even 2 against Sam Houston to get yourself prepared for the CUSA championships, go for it. Because then you got to go to Lynchburg, and hopefully by then you'll not only will you have a spot, you'll have experience against the best that Conference USA will have to offer. And like I keep saying it, DBU. If you beat DBU in the regular season, I have confidence they can do it again in the tournament.
And you have to think about it. It's hard to beat a team twice, and FIU is going to have to do that. And also, you look at the finish to this season. You have to play Western Kentucky, Florida Atlantic in the middle, Dallas Baptist, Miami on the road, you have Liberty and Sam Houston. By no means is that an easy finish to this season. In fact, FIU gets off to a pretty good conference start. You had Jacksonville State, Middle Tennessee, La Tech, which is a tough game no matter what. And then New Mexico State, Kennesaw State, which is I'm not exactly sure how they are in baseball there. I think they were pretty solid last year.
Yeah.
But by no means is this an easy conference schedule, but FIU could get off to a very strong start. And maybe if they fall off a little bit towards the end, that'll kind of not benefit them by any means, but definitely they'll stay over 500. And I think that's a big goal. They want to win over 30 games. That's by far the biggest goal this program has. And not just that, to win the Conference USA tournament, and they have a chance.
Yeah. By the way, Kennesaw last year, 32-24. 19-10 in the conference.
Not a bad team at all.
Yeah, not too shabby. They went to they were in the Atlantic Sun Conference. That's a very southeastern conference. I think there's 4 teams in Florida: Stetson, FGCU, UNF, and I think I'm forgetting somebody else. But they won their first 2 games. Actually, they won their first 3 in the tournament. They made it to the championship game. They made it to the ASUN championship game. Lost to Stetson. And Stetson had a really good team last season. And Kennesaw matched up to them well. But yeah, I'm very happy you pointed that out. Late April, starting with that Miami. I'll throw in the Miami game at home because it's Miami. Then you host Western Kentucky, FAU, DBU. The list goes on. That is going to be the best stretch of this season that'll ultimately decide how good this FIU baseball team can be. If they can excel in this latter, because it's going to mean 2 things. 1, you're beating some of the best teams in Conference USA. 2, you're going to be entering the CUSA tournament on a heater, which is really what you want to really get things going in Lynchburg. But how great FIU will do from late August to early May getting into the CUSA tournament will be the best showcase of where this team is at. They can be absolutely awful in the non-con and even the early stretch of CUSA. But if they lock in and get things going late in the year against literally the best teams in Conference USA and Miami, that's going to be a very exciting period when you get to the CUSA championships, because FIU could be on one. And if they're on one, the rest of CUSA better watch out.
100% agree with that. I think we're basically done. I think the last thing we'll do is so we'll do a pitching MVP.
Okay.
And a position player MVP. So Jake, the floor is now yours.
Okay. Hitting wise, it's hard to argue against some of the most notable players that this team has, right? Regardless of where you go. I mean, you could easily say Brylan West, you could easily say Uloa. And I think who would be the front runner? Keyshawn, I suppose. He's got the numbers to do it, but I think that one player that kind of has a chip on their shoulder hitting wise might have to be Brylan West, because of what he was able to do last season to only end up being in the second team. He knows that the road is open for him to get into that first team. So if he has yet another stellar year and leads a billion statistics offensively, that kind of like how he did last year, I think this is going to be for him. So I'm going to give it to Brylan West. to be my hitting MVP. Pitching wise, I already said this at the top. I'm really going to have to see to believe when it comes to our pitching. But I'll give it to Owen. I know it's kind of a soft pick to give it to Owen, but he's talked a big game on the podcast and even off the podcast about what he can do to get better if he can turn into the starter and even have some of his best games towards the latter end of the season. If he can do that, I mean, we saw he had success against some of the best teams that FIU played last season. He went 1 hit, 3 scoreless innings against Miami. I mean, gosh, that's really hard to do against one of the top dogs in the ACC. If he can do that on a consistent basis, the road is also open for him. So I think it's 2 soft picks to go with Brylan and Owen Puck, but I think they've provided a lot of incentive for me to go with them.
All righty, I guess I'm up here. So I'll add to this. I will also be doing a lineup projection, which I think we said we were going to do. Not a lineup projection of defensive fielding projection. So at catcher, we're going to go with Rooney.
Okay.
At first, we're going to go with Brylan.
Nice.
At second, I will be going with Alex Uloa. Shortstop, Kerry Valentine. Third base, Sammy Fisher. Left field, it'll be, who was I saying? Keyshawn.
Mm-hmm.
Center field, I'm going to go with Albert Serrano. Right field, going to go with Austin Deering. And my DH is going to be Kyle Kohler. My opening day starter, and this is going to also be my pitching MVP, and this is where I'm going to start. It's going to be Easton Marks. Easton Marks, nice. We didn't talk about him a lot, but very good player, honestly. Similar to Owen, struggled with the command last season at his prior school. But I still believe that, the velo, it's 97, 98. It was super impressive to just watch him in person. I'm very excited to see what he does. I think he'll be the team's opening day starter. If not, he'll be in the rotation for sure, along with Owen and one other pitcher, maybe Logan Rundy, which we didn't talk about. Logan Rundy was a huge piece despite the injuries. I'm excited to see how he comes back. But hitting, I'm going to go with Alex Uloa. I'm very, very high on Uloa. I think he has a really good shot, not just at winning Conference USA Player of the Year, but as well getting drafted in the pros. So I'm very excited to see what he is able to provide. I think it's going to be a really fun season for FIU, Jake. I'm really excited to see what this team does. And I think we'll wrap it up here, Jake. Paws up preview.
I do want to provide a bit of context, by the way, Kev, about our opponent, Stonehill, just to run some numbers with you guys, because this is it's technically a preview for the Stonehill
game.
You're
right. Yeah.
Technically, they finished 18-29 last season. They actually went on a Florida tour last year. They lost 2-3 against Bethune-Cookman. They lost 2-3 against FAU, and then they lost a close game to Miami. That was the Florida tour last year. All things considered, though, when he came to conference play, they finished with a mediocre 13-17. And, college baseball is funny. They only had 14 home games last year compared to 32 games on the road. And they went 8-7. Yeah, they were road warriors, but it didn't really pay off. They went 10-22. On the road, so it doesn't fare well. By the way, they lost their last 4 games. One was against Bryant midweek. The last series they lost was against Merrimack in the Northeastern Conference. So there's going to be some familiarity there. By the way, looking across the board here, I don't think hitting wise they're a terrible team. On their best days, they actually got into double-digit wins quite a bit, but on their worst days, not only were they shut out, they gave up a lot of runs in the process. The Northeastern Conference as they play, and by the way, some great talent there. Sacred Heart, LIU, Merrimack, some of the top 3 dogs of the NEC, to provide some context. Stonehill, 13-17 overall. They finished fourth to last, so not exactly middle of the pack, but not the complete bottom. They were just kind of a mediocre team. They did not get an invite to the tournament. The NEC tournament. So that's kind of where Stonehill is at entering this game. Not a lot of buzz, not a lot of hype, and not as high expectations for FIU. I would say, to compare, the expectations not great for Stonehill. So, I mean, I don't even think we really need to pick who we think will win. It's definitely going to be FIU that we think will not only win the game, but the series. If you can start off the season off with a sweep against Stonehill, you're living luxurious, I'll say. But yeah, just to provide a bit about Stonehill, they ended last season on a sour note. They're trying to fix things this year, but on paper, there's not a lot to be hyped about Stonehill, and that's the extent of them.
if you look at it, FIU has a chance to start 5-0. You sweep Stonehill and you beat Bethune on the road. That would be a pretty nice start to the season. But all right, we're gonna wrap it up here, Jake. Make sure you guys are all there. February 14th, 6:30 p.m. on Valentine's Day. Make sure to bring your significant other because it'll be a good time at FIU Baseball Stadium. Opening night, FIU Stonehill. From Jake and myself, as always, paws up, baby.
Paws up!